Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with let me get it actually. I didn't even have it here. There we go. A very interesting box, the SWR recordings of violinist Henryk Szeryng. Yeah, made between 1956 and 1984. These are original SWR tapes. And there's some really amazing stuff in here. Now, I have to have a confession. We all have our blind spots, right? I wouldn't say that Henryk Szeryng was a blind spot. He was an amazing violinist. I like his stuff. But for example, when we were doing the Brahms concerto repertoire thing, I didn't talk about him. And he has at least 4 or 5 recordings of the Brahms concerto flying around, including that classic Mercury Living Presence one with Dorati, and then he remade it with Haitink. I mean, he was an astounding violinist, and that was like one of his signature pieces. But I felt that, there was a guy who was very, very good and very reliable and really consistent, and he did it over and over and over again, and he kind of canceled himself out, and we could somehow come back and do something separate, because he was an incredible violinist. But as I was going through my life as a critic and whatnot, we all find the artists we kind of like. And from a violin point of view, I liked Arthur Grumio. I liked, Heifetz. I liked Perlman. I love Nathan Milstein. I mean, there are just a few who, you sort of circulate around, and how many can you really deal with? So Szeryng kind of fell off of my radar. And that wasn't quite fair, actually, because I know that he's great. He's really great. The question is, and it's a problem we all face, we pick and choose. We have our clumps of great artists who we like, and that's who we stick with. And so when lists come up and names come up, you just tend to ignore the ones who you haven't had the most association with. And Szeryng was just one of those for me. It's not because he wasn't great. It's my lacuna, if you want to call it that. And So I'm making up for it. I just feel I should make up for it because so many of you were so pissed at me for not mentioning him in association with his Brahms. And his name came up again, of course, in connection with my greatest recordings ever in this series, the Grumio Bach Sonatas and Partitas for solo violin, while some of you chose Szeryng. Now, I like his recordings of the Sonatas and Partitas. They're very different from Grumio's. Very, very different. I mean, just compare the finales of the first sonata, the G minor sonata, and you'll hear how different they are. Grumio is quick and lithe and nimble, and he seems to be very, very fluent with long lines. Szeryng, it's almost as if he's outlining the notes with a highlighter. He's more deliberate. His articulation is firmer and more accent prone. It's a totally legitimate and marvelous, I might add, approach to the music, but as different as can be. So I think it's worth talking about him in terms of this fantastic box of historical recordings. I mean, it's like his whole concerto repertoire is in here. It's 5 CDs. And what's just as cool is that there's some amazing conductors in here. Most of the conducting is with either Stanislaw Skrowaczewski or Ernest Bour, which means we're talking about it's either Saarbrücken or the Baden-Baden Radio Symphony Orchestras, because it's SWR, that's Südwestfunk, the Southwest German radio. And the big orchestras there were Baden-Baden and Saarbrücken, and now it's Saarbrücken, Kaiserslautern, and all that stuff. And Stuttgart radio and things like that. But anyway, so you had all of these things here, and they're great. So let me just tell you what's in it, and then I'm going to turn you loose, and hopefully I will be forgiven by all of you Szeryng fans for not having talked about him as much as he probably deserves, because he does deserve it. It's not a question. So it starts with the 2 Bach violin concertos, with the Baden-Baden Orchestra and the Kammer Orchestra des Saarländischen Rundfunks. Carl Risten part. Remember him? He's doing the first. And Paul Zacher is doing that. And Paul Zacher is also doing the Mozart G major violin concerto, Crucial 216, which is lovely. It's a gorgeous violin concerto. Zacher is not the most thrilling conductor, neither was wristed part for that matter. These are old style performances of this music. Zacher, of course, along with Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge and Serge Koussevitzky, basically commissioned the entire 20th century orchestral repertoire for either chamber orchestra or a large ensemble. And, important guy. A great conductor? Not so much. But, of course, you've got Szeryng, and he's great, and so that's fine. Then we have two more Mozart concertos. We've got the A major, Koschel 219. That's number 5, by the way. And the G major is number 3, in case you were curious. And the violin concerto in D major, Koschel 271I, which is sometimes known as number 7. And that is of doubtful provenance. No one is quite sure whether it's by Mozart or not, so it's usually left out of the usual ones. But they're all very nicely done. And let's see, Ernest Bour is conducting the Turkish, number 5, the Turkish concerto. And let's see who's doing this one. And Skrowaczewski is doing number 7. So that's not too shabby. Then we've got the Beethoven with Ernest Bour. Oh, it's a beautiful performance of that. And the Schumann Violin Concerto, again with Ernest Bour. These are with Baden-Baden. And then there's the Lalo Symphony Espagnole. All right, fine. With Rolf Reinhardt conducting the Baden-Baden Band, the BBB. And the Brahms Concerto with Ernest Bour. Really, really fine performance of that. But then again, all of his performances of the Brahms were wonderful. And then on CD5, you've got Sibelius, let's see, which is conducted by Hiroyuki Iwaki, which is with Saarbrücken, pardon me, and the Berg Concerto, which he recorded with Kubelik, I believe it was, wasn't it? Yes, with Ernest Bour this time. And the Szymanowski first, which is really cool with Skrowaczewski, who really knows his Szymanowski. So that's marvelous. Now, like I said, these were recorded between 1956 and 1984. So the sonics are variable. They range from mono to stereo. More of it is late than not, I think, here. It's mostly from the 70s, I think. Let me see. Let me see if we can get some dates in here, shall we? Just so that we're perfectly clear. Well, why won't they tell us in the front? They won't. Will they tell us in the back? Yes. Okay, so CD1, which is the Bach stuff, 59 and 60. So there we go. CD2, which is the Mozart stuff, is 58. CD3, which is other Mozart stuff, is 56 and 71. CD4 is 63 and 61, and CD5 is 84, 57, and 78. So they were all the recordings made at Baden-Baden Studio 5, see the radio broadcast recordings, which means that even the mono ones generally sound pretty good, except for, well, a couple of them. And let me just see whether they have, and most of them are in, I believe, in stereo. A lot of them should be. Let's see. Oh, look at who the producer is. Dr. Zerenmeyer Eller, my best friend in the whole world, or one of them, and someone who has participated on this channel, on a few occasions and come to visit. And I've gone to visit him in Germany. So yeah, this was one of Zeren's productions, and I'm not sure why I haven't talked about it until now. And I'm glad that I'm doing it now, because it really is. It's quite spectacular, actually, and it's not expensive, and it's nicely put together, and it's Szeryng for all of you Szeryng people out there, of which I'm rapidly becoming one. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.